Hey, what's up? Today we're making a mythic item tier list, something I had planned for a long time already, and now that patch 13.10 is finally out, it makes sense to do it now since we just got some new mythic items, and people keep asking me what do I think of Echoes of Helia and the new Rageblade and such, so let's sit down and put this debate to rest with a mythic tier list. To preface this, I want to say I think Udyr can build pretty much every mythic item if you as a player really put your mind to it. You can make it work. Of course, some are better than others and some will definitely make the game more enjoyable than others, but yeah, as I said, you can probably go with every item and get somewhat of a good outcome with it. Now the tier list is gonna be rated by 3 factors. 1 of how viable the item is, 2 of how fun the item is, the fun angle of the item, right? And 3rd, my personal preference and personal enjoyment, because after all, I'm not a robot. I just don't just see the facts black and white. Some of the items I just like more than others, even if they're not better than others. But all of these 3 factors will go into where in the mythic tier list it's gonna place. Alright, let's start right off the bat with Crown of the Shattered Queen. Now that is an item you don't see a lot. It's probably pretty shit tier, it needs a buff, for sure, but it's a fun item, and there's stuff to like about it. So first off, it gives decent stats, a lot of AP, and Udyr has good AP scalings, and it gives movement speed. Movement speed is something that is always appreciated on the deer. And also, Udyr has a really straightforward engage. He just runs at people, right? So having the safeguard effect that this item gives you to reduce incoming damage makes engaging with Udyr a bit easier, right? You have passive movement speed on this item, you get quicker to the enemy, and all the shit they throw at you to damage you before you even get to them is getting a bit reduced. It's definitely not D tier. There's definitely some items in this tier list that have a place reserved in the D tier. I'd put it in a comfortable C tier. We might adjust that later, but I think C tier is pretty good for this item. Okay, now going on to what is probably, yeah, for sure an S tier, Divine Sunderer. Divine Sunderer is an item you even see played on Udyr as like meta. If you don't feel like playing Jak'Sho, Phoenix, full tank Udyr in the jungle, you're probably gonna see some bare Q max Udyr players with Divine Sunderer, or you could actually play it with Phoenix as well, on top lane or even in the jungle as well. Sheen items are always great on Udyr, because Udyr just gets to spam abilities like crazy, and obviously he auto attacks a lot. So there's probably hardly another champion out there that can make more use of Sheen procs than Udyr. It also has a pretty nice interaction with Grasp of the Undying, where you can trigger both at the same time and have some really huge short trades. Or you can go with Conqueror, and the sustain that Divine Sunderer gives you allows you to drag out the fight and actually get your Conqueror stacked up and then stat diff the enemy, right? I've been playing a lot of Udyr Divine Sunderer on the top lane. I think it's a great item. Yeah, that is an easy S tier, I think. Oh, and one more thing, of course. It gives Armor Pen as well as Magic Pen as their passive, right? And a lot of champions that build Divine Sunderer either use the Armor Pen or the Magic Pen, in most cases just the Armor Pen, but Udyr, having physical and magical damage, can use both of the penetration effects, so definitely huge value that not every champion gets to use. Easy S tier. Easy S tier. Now, Duskblade. Pre-rework Duskblade, where it gave Invis on every kill, the item looked kind of fun, you know, kind of funky. It was definitely interesting, but always a troll angle. I can't remember the last time I built Duskblade. If you compare to all the other mythic items, especially now after the rework, Duskblade just gives straight up damage but 0 utility. by the time it gives you the utility by making you untargetable after you got a kill, right, it's probably too late already. The other mythic items already give you utility effects during the fight, during the engage, but not after you've killed somebody. I don't think Udyr is comfortable enough engaging with zero help of the item and getting the kill to get the untargetability. And even then, is the untargetability really worth it? It has a cooldown. It can't be spammed like the old Duskblade's invisibility, and obviously untargetability is not as great as invisibility. So yeah, I'm gonna have to say I'm sorry for all the Duskblade fans out there, but this is an easy D tier for me. I don't remember the last time I've played Duskblade Udyr, and I don't feel the need to, ever. Now, Echoes of Helia Udyr. That is something I get asked damn near every stream. What do you think of the new Echoes of Helia? Well, a lot of champions have been abusing Echoes of Helia. A lot of champions that can spam hard CC on a safe distance. For instance, Ashe. Ashe just perma-slowing with her W and Q gets to stack her Echoes of Helia and activate Font of Life at the same time. And the enemy then attacking the Font of Life marked enemy heals of the Font of Life. That activates Echoes of Helia. And so on and so on. It just spams because neither of these things have cooldown. Echoes of Helia doesn't have cooldown and Font of Life doesn't have cooldown. But one thing that stayed true through all the seasons, all those years, if somebody else can do it, Udyr can do it, right? Udyr got a stun on his E, Udyr got a slow on his Phoenix, so he can spam the Font of Life rune as well. And he also can spam damage on the enemy by just the Phoenix burn and auto attack spamming the enemy. So he gets to stack Echoes of Helia and Font of Life crazy hard as well. I've played a lot of Echoes of Helia already since the item has been released. It has been nerfed already, and I'm still playing it, and it's still fun. I think this is definitely one of the most amazing items on Udyr right now. The fun angle is huge. All the damage and healing you get to proc of this item is amazing. I might actually play this in my rank games if I feel like it. If I would get bored of Jak'Sho, because it is a pretty simplistic build, right? And I want to get a bit funky, I play this in my rank games, and not even with a troll angle. It's super fun and good. So this item, easy S tier. Alright, moving on to Eclipse. Eclipse is actually one of the lethality items that I have used in my 101 Udyr build series on an item build called Khajiit Merchant Udyr, which is pretty much just a master trader on the top lane. You never lose a trade if you go that item build. It's all about having Shield Bash in your runes, Shield Bash not having a cooldown and being reset every time you use a shield, and just spamming Turtle and Eclipse Shield to out-trade the enemy. Eclipse, I think, is a great item on Udyr because it gives you bonus damage, just like Duskblade, on your attacks, but it also gives you utility after you've damaged the enemy 2 times. It gives you movement speed and a shield, and this movement speed and shield allows you to either disengage from the trade, right, and probably leave with a good trade, or use this movement speed to run ahead of the enemy and keep trading. It just leaves open so many options. It gives you effects and then just says, now you decide what to do with it. Great item, great item. I wouldn't say it's meta. If you're good on Udyr, you have a lot of experience, you can make it work top lane. Against certain enemies it might be too aggressive. I'm thinking of putting it in A tier. But personal enjoyment and the history of it being in a 101 Udyr builds and its interaction with Shield Bash, I think it's an S tier for me. It's almost A tier because it's not meta, but for me it's S tier. Next up we got Evenshroud. Now Evenshroud has actually seen some meta play in the past patch. The support items have gotten a little upgrade in itemization and have much nicer stat distribution and build path now. If you compare Jak'Sho and Evenshroud with one another, crazy apparent that Evenshroud has good stats. The only thing that Evenshroud has less than Jak'Sho is 200 health. And it costs, what, like 900 gold less? So the stats you get with this item instantly and so early into the game, because it's so cheap, outscale Jak'Sho like crazy. The reason Jak'Sho costs so much is because of the effect it gives you. Evenshroud here is like a nice budget option. But if you go Demonic Embrace into Jak'Sho, that's both 3k plus items. It's really expensive. It's a really expensive build. Now if you build Demonic Embrace, you didn't make a lot of money afterwards because your team kind of fell off and you inted someplace, right? Evenshroud is a good budget option here. It's a cheaper Jak'Sho. Also the effect of the item I think is really interesting, really fun. It's more team oriented, right? When you use Jak'Sho, you just look to scale in the fight and stat check the enemy with all the armor and magic resistance you get. When you go Evenshroud, every time you immobilize the enemy, they get 10% more damage from your allies and you. So that will actually buff your Demonic Embrace damage, it will buff your Phoenix damage, and it will buff the damage of your AD carry, support, mid laner, top laner, whoever decides to join the fight with you. So that's really a nice team-oriented item. Of course, it's a support item, it kind of makes sense. For me, the item personally, it's definitely fun to debuff the enemy and play around the team. And it actually being played in meta, I think this is another S tier for me. Trust, I'm not throwing everything in S tier. I'm not throwing everything in S tier. It's just these last few items are all really, really goated, in my opinion. Right, next up we got Everfrost. A lot to say about Everfrost. During its height, the Everfrost meta, where every game there was a Cassidy mid lane with Everfrost, I've actually played the item on Udyr, even in my ranked games. I was looking to imitate the Twisted Fate build that was going around at that time. Predator was really strong, and there were a lot of Twisted Fate players running Predator with Everfrost, and then just running people down with a gold card, stunning them, and following up that gold card with Everfrost that the enemy can't dodge because they're stunned. And obviously a huge catch follows and your team can kill the enemy. Now, me seeing that, I look at Udyr and I'm like, yo, Udyr has a point and click stun just like Twisted Fate. Predator with movement speed is decent on Udyr. I'll try this shit out, right? And I played Predator, Udyr in the jungle with Everfrost and I got some huge catches with it. That was still on old Udyr and I really enjoyed it. Now, ever since then, Predator's movement speed has been nerfed. Everfrost's root duration has been nerfed by 0.5 seconds. And Udyr's E stun duration has been nerfed by 0.25 seconds. So less speed, less root, less stun. It has been nerfed to the ground. If we would be still talking about old Udyr and old Everfrost, this would be an S tier for me. The only downside this item has that it gives you mana while you're playing in the jungle. And mana in the jungle is pretty useless, it's wasted gold, it's not a good stat for you. But the active effect of the item alone made it worth it. It's so fun to catch people off guard, because you run them down, right? And the enemy expects, okay, in about 2 seconds he will reach me and try to bear slap me to stun me, right? But then you just use the active Everfrost, you root the enemy way before he expects you to do anything to you, and then you follow up with the bear stun right after, right? Beautiful, beautiful item. But the height of this item is definitely over. It's still fun, I play it every now and then, but to me this is now a B tier probably. I was thinking of putting it A tier, but every time I think of Everfrost, I can't enjoy the item as much as I used to, just because I think of how good it used to be. Every time I play Everfrost, I just think, well, oh man, this catch would have worked with the old Everfrost, right? Had way more root duration, my bear stun was better, you know. And there's also something to be said about new Udyr now having a slow field with his Phoenix. Do you need the Everfrost as much anymore, right? If you already have the Phoenix slow field after your bear stun, do you need Everfrost, right? So there's definitely discussion to be had. Almost put it A tier, let's put it B tier, right? Okay, next up we got Galeforce. Galeforce is also an item that I've been building on Udyr in 101 Udyr build series. It's pretty interesting to have a dash on Udyr. I think if you have a lot of experience on Udyr, you can make good work with this item happen. Playing Udyr really trains you to have good positioning. There's a lot of champions out there that have too many dashes. There's a bunch of champions that have way too many dashes. They don't really know what it means to be out of position. Udyr needs to make every step he makes count. With Udyr you really learn positioning. Now when you build Galeforce, all of a sudden you have a dash on Udyr. And your good positioning knowledge plus having a dash can make for some insane engages. Also, Galeforce has definitely a fun angle similar to Everfrost, because the enemy just doesn't see it coming. You catch them off guard, right? When Udyr runs at you, you don't expect Udyr to be dashing. Now obviously, Prowler's Claw Udyr kinda scarred some enemies, but now that Prowler's Claw is removed, they don't expect him dashing again. So we're bringing it back, right? I've been playing Galeforce Udyr in the jungle with First Strike, and it's a really interesting combo, because when you dash onto the enemy with Galeforce, the active item actually shoots missiles at the enemy that damage them. That damage triggers First Strike. So even though you're a melee champion and you have to run at the enemy to hit them, you almost always get to activate your First Strike onto them. The missiles of Galeforce reach them before you do, right? So you can stack a lot of gold and get ahead early if you play Galeforce Udyr in the jungle. I combined that with Essence Reaver and just one-shot people by dashing into them, slap them with the stun, follow up with a bear slap, right? It's definitely a very fun item. Now, is it meta? No, not at all. Not at all. Even if you're really good on Udyr, this item is very risky. And it will probably see some nerfs as well in the future, because a lot of AD carries are abusing it right now as their mythic item. I will definitely put it above Everfrost, but with upcoming nerfs it might actually become B tier. But it's not meta, be warned, I'm only putting this item high in the tier list because it's really, really fun to me. I enjoy this item a lot, but it's really, really risky. If you don't get ahead early with this item, it's gonna hurt. With Galeforce Udyr, you're looking to dominate early, get your Sense Reaver and finish the game at like 20 minutes, 23 minutes. After that, it's game over. It's game over. Alright, so that's an A tier for me though. Alright, next up we got Ghostblade. Ghostblade is definitely really strong in the meta right now. A lot of champions are abusing it. Not only junglers like Hecarim or Kayn, but also bot laners, top laners, everywhere. The item is fucking everywhere, bro. I've seen Vayne building Ghostblade right now just because the item is so good. And Vayne is supposed to be this Rageblade on-hit champion, right? But nope, just Ghostblade and one-shotting. Everyone has been doing it. Obviously, the item has received a nerf already. I think they took 6 lethality away from it and see if that balances it out. Me personally don't care too much about the lethality part. That was just a cherry on top. What I care about is that Ghostblade gives this insane amount of movement speed. It gives out of combat movement speed, and you can actively use it to gain even more movement speed. Speed is always fun on Udyr. Also, I think Ghostblade holds a really important place in Udyr's builds right now, because I think it's the strongest lethality item for him right now. Since Prowler's Claw is gone, Udyr has a really tough time, if you want to build lethality Udyr, of catching the enemy. Back in the day, it was just Prowler's Claw, dash onto the enemy, you stun them, you one-shot them. Game over, right? With Ghostblade, you can't dash onto them, but you have a lot of movement speed. You have something to work with. I don't enjoy Ghostblade as much as Eclipse, but it's definitely a fun and strong item. Keep your eyes on that one. If you want to build like a one-shot lethality Udyr in the jungle, I think Ghostblade is definitely the way to go. So that would be an A tier for me. Right, next up we got Goredrinker. Goredrinker, I feel like, struggles to find its place in League of Legends overall, not just with Udyr. Every champion that is supposed to build Goredrinker just goes Eclipse. Even now that Eclipse Omnivamp has been removed, we still see Aatrox, for instance, running around with Eclipse. I mean, the Omnivamp of Goredrinker is nice. The Omnivamp triggering on our abilities, we actually get some value out of that. What I really hate about Goredrinker is that when you use the active effect of it, you need to stop for a second. Stridebreaker and Shurelya's, for instance, don't stop you while you activate these items. You can just keep running. And this is something that is really important to me on Udyr. I don't ever want to stop. I want to always be moving. So that is a big minus on that item. Now, if you want to play a full lifesteal Udyr, a full vamp Udyr on the top lane, I think the item is very fun. I've played it on that angle. But I don't think Goredrinker Udyr is ever gonna be meta. I can never imagine that. And aside from a full Vamptation build, I don't see Goredrinker seeing a lot of play. It's more fun and better than Duskblade for sure, but I can't comfortably put this thing in a B tier, so I'm gonna put Goredrinker into C tier. Alright, next up we got Heartsteel. Talk about a fun angle. I think every champion in the game built Heartsteel when it came out, because the thought of permanently stacking health just sounds so fun. Every champion that permanently stacks is fun. Veigar getting unlimited ability power, Nasus with his Q stacking, Senna getting infinite range. Oh my god, that champion is cringe. But you being able to get that permanently stacking power by buying an item is such an interesting thing, right? So Heartsteel on Udyr is definitely fun. I don't argue with me on that one. Heartsteel on Udyr is fun, right? There's no way around that. That being said, is it good? I think it's decent. It's decent at the very least. I've played a bit of top lane Udyr with Heartsteel, and I've been rushing Demonic Embrace first, getting that ability power, right? And when you then get Heartsteel and start stacking health, the health you stack actually gives you ability power with Demonic Embrace. So you're stacking health and ability power infinitely, permanently. Very, very fun interaction. It just only leaves you with 0 resistances, and that is the trap a lot of people fall into when they build Heartsteel. When you build Heartsteel, you often combine it with Demonic Embrace and Titanic Hydra to get the most use out of it. But then you just spend 2 items with 3k gold, and you still don't have any resistances. You look a lot tankier than you actually are. You have a lot of health and you feel tanky, but then when you actually join a team fight and they have one of these shredder-like AD carries like Jinx, Kog'Maw, one of these spam auto attackers, you're gonna fall in a second. You're toast before you get to her. Would I put Heartsteel in A tier? No, I can't. I think maybe it's because I haven't found the Heartsteel build for me. The item is really, really fun, but every time I actually pick the item, I don't perform as much as I feel like I should be. It's definitely fun on the top lane, especially if you combine it with Grasp of the Undying. You get some huge trades in and you stack health like crazy. It's super fun. For me, it's a B tier. It's very close to an A tier, but seeing Ghostblade sitting at the A tier, even though I enjoy Heartsteel more, just the meta aspect of it puts it down a bit for me, for sure. I can't put Heartsteel much higher. Alright, next up we got Rocketbelt. Now, Hextech Rocketbelt is a really interesting item on Udyr for the same reason as Everfrost and Galeforce. Again, you get an active item on Udyr that gives him utility he has never seen before. You can dash on Udyr. That is always big value. Especially with Phoenix Udyr, being able to get good positioning for your Awakened R is important. Oftentimes in the late game of Udyr, you're just looking to somehow sneak into the enemy team or like close to them, drop your fat Awakened R, and then disengage before they can fuck with you, right? And then they burn in your Awakened R and lose like half their health, and you're like, fuck yeah, okay, the next team fight should be easy now, because we already burned them. Hextech Rocketbelt just makes it so much easier, right? When the enemy is just even close to being out of position, you can dash onto them, they get the rocket belt damage, you get the bonus movement speed, you get the dash into them, and then you drop your Awakened R and you can disengage. And it's just much faster than walking up, obviously. And the item provides insane damage with its magic penetration and ability power, while also giving you health. And it's a huge privilege. There's a lot of AP items, AP Mythic items, that just provide pure damage and no defense. Not so with Rocketbelt. I think the item is low-key hidden broken. Echo has been abusing it for years, and so can Udyr. For me, this item is an A tier for sure. Why not S tier? I don't build it that often. When I'm looking to one-shot on Udyr, I usually build Night Harvester with Lichbane or something like that, because I'm missing the old days of Flame Pop Udyr, where you just one-shot people with one auto attack, right? If you want consistent damage, Rocketbelt is probably better, but yeah, for me it's an A tier. If I would play the item more, it might even be an S tier. I think you could actually climb with Rocketbelt Udyr if you play it enough. I would play it in my rank games actually. Alright, next up we got Iceborn Gauntlet. My god, I don't know why people are so fascinated with this item. Damn near every stream, I have somebody asking me my opinion about their Iceborn Gauntlet Udyr build, and I don't get it, guys. I don't get it. Now, the item has a really fun effect. If you hit the enemy, a frost field appears, and in that frost field the enemy has 10% reduced damage. So it's like an exhaust. You have exhaust on a Sheen item. A weak exhaust, but an exhaust nonetheless. It's a really fun item. It's a cool effect. But let's get to the downsides, alright? This item, as I said, makes a frost field. The slow on that frost field is not that good. Especially when you consider that Udyr has Phoenix Dance, which is a slow field that you have on a like 4 or 6 second cooldown. And it slows just as much as Iceborn Gauntlet. You don't need the slow of Iceborn Gauntlet. You don't need it. So that's already gold value lost. And even if you play max Q Udyr and you only have 1 point in Phoenix, even then the Phoenix slow is getting really close to just outclassing the Iceborn Gauntlet slow. And the thing I hate most about Iceborn Gauntlet is its Sheen effect, okay? Sheen is supposed to make your auto attacks really fucking slap. Divine Sunderer, Lichbane, Ascent Reaver, and Trinity Force all do a good job at that. They ramp up your auto attack like crazy. It's like hitting the enemy 3 times at once. Now, Iceborn Gauntlet is the odd one out here. Obviously it's the tank Sheen item, so it has to be weaker, but this is inexcusable. If you look at Sheen, it gives your next auto attack 100% base AD attack bonus. If you look at Iceborn Gauntlet, it's the same effect. Building out the Sheen item, which is 700 gold, to Iceborn Gauntlet, which is over 3k gold, you don't get any more Sheen damage. Iceborn Gauntlet deals the exact amount of Sheen damage your Sheen does. You don't get more damage. The frost field is useless, so you're really only building Iceborn Gauntlet because the 10% damage reduce is funny. Of course you can build it on Udyr. Udyr can build every item. But if you compare to any other Sheen item, I cannot suggest it. I cannot. Not with a good conscience, guys. I'm an all-around fun guy. I troll around with my Udyr builds, but this gots to go, bro. No. This, even though it's a Sheen item on Udyr, this is D tier. Forget about Iceborn Gauntlet. Do yourself a favor. It is a D tier. Now, speaking of D tier, looky what we got here. Infinity Edge. I don't think anyone is on the edge of their seat for this item. Because, honestly, when have you last built Infinity Edge on Udyr? I don't think that happens a lot. The item is a pure stat stick. The only thing it gives you is damage, damage, damage. You get crit chance, more crit damage, AD, and mythic passive, more AD. This item is a pure stat stick. To be able to use this item on Udyr, I think you would just have to camp bushes all day and hope for people to face check you. I don't see this item working any other way. It just doesn't give any utility. There's not much to say about this item because it's just really dumbed down stat stick. For me, that's another D tier. Sorry for all the crit enjoyers, but with the other crit mythic items, it just cannot keep up. You can't look at Infinity Edge in a vacuum. It's not a standalone item. It's a crit mythic item, and you have to look at the other crit items. There's Galeforce, there's Navori's, and there's Rageblade, right? And all of these are better. So that is an easy D tier again. Now we got the star guest, Jak'Sho. Udyr has been building the same meta build for over 10 patches. With a patch coming out every 2 weeks, Udyr has been building Jak'Sho for a very long time. Very long time. Say what you will, a lot of people might hate Jak'Sho because it's boring, but it's the most solid option on Udyr. Usually on Udyr in the jungle, you go Conqueror. Conqueror stacks up during the fight, giving you more AD or AP if you build Demonic Embrace, of course. And Jak'Sho ramps up during the fight, just like Conqueror, but giving you armor and magic resistance. Just like old Udyr, the new Udyr relies a lot on stat checking the enemy. So having all this bonus armor, bonus magic resist, and bonus ability power, ramping up makes you really scary in a team fight. Yeah, not much to say about this item. It deserves an S tier spot for sure. Even if you don't enjoy Jak'Sho at all because it's really passive and you don't have a lot of control of the item, just the meta aspect of this item being so strong, it deserves an S tier, no matter if it's not fun to you or not. It's just great. It really is. The value of this item cannot be underestimated. It's so good that Udyr's entire rune set is built around this item. He goes Conqueror to ramp up AP while this is ramping up armor and magic resistance, and you go Conditioning for even more bonus armor and magic resistance this item provides. Next up we got Locket of the Iron Solari. Obviously we're looking at a support item here, so we cannot really speak for a meta angle. Now, me personally, I love building support items on Udyr. As you can see on my tier list already, we have rated 2 support items here and they both landed S tier, Echoes of Helia and Evenshroud. I love supporting on Udyr, it's just fun to me. For me, it's a teamfight champion, and having a positive impact on my teammates instead of just having a negative impact on my enemies is something that fascinates me. Just helping my allies to kill the enemy instead of directly killing the enemy is just so more stylish, you know? It's just like a way around. Now that being said, I don't think Iron Solari can keep up with Echoes of Helia or Evenshroud. The effect this item has is super fun. It gives you an aura that raises the armor and magic resistance of your allies, and you can actively use the item to give your allies a shield. It's cool, it's fun, but the stats are meh. You definitely have to build a damage item first before going Locket of the Iron Solari. You can't rush it. Echoes of Helia, for instance, you can rush. Evenshroud is also a second item, you can't rush that, but Evenshroud is a lot stronger than Locket of the Iron Solari. Looking at all the items we have left, I think they kind of outscale Locket. It's gonna be a B tier for me. I don't play the item enough. If I would play it more, I would probably rate it higher if I found like a build that really plays around the item. But I can't think of any fun synergies this item has, so it's kind of like a standalone rating for it. Next off we got Luden's Tempest. Now we can't talk about Luden's Tempest without also addressing Night Harvester, because it's pretty much the same item, the only difference being Night Harvester providing you with health instead of mana, and ability haste instead of magic penetration. Now, Luden's magic penetration is nice, but not necessary on Udyr. Udyr has a very good AP scalings, and he doesn't need magic penetration. Magic penetration is something that a lot of champions build that don't have good ability power scalings, and they rather not go for straight ability power. There's also the fact that Luden's Tempest gives you a bunch of mana. If you're playing Udyr in the mid lane or top lane, you can make use of that mana, but most Udyr players are gonna play Udyr in the jungle. And if you play Udyr in the jungle, the mana is useless. You don't need mana in the jungle, ever. You don't need a mana item in the jungle. Also Night Harvester being able to proc on multiple enemies in a teamfight is huge for Udyr, because it's so easy for him. If you activate your Phoenix and you run into the enemy team, you're easily gonna proc the items 2 to 3 times at least. While Luden's Tempest can only proc once and then has a 10-second cooldown before you can proc it again. And it doesn't provide you any health to survive these 10 seconds. Luden's Tempest is made for poking champions who can just cast an ability, proc the item, and then chill and wait for the cooldown and stay on their max range. Udyr doesn't have that privilege. Udyr has to go into the fight. So to me, Luden's Tempest is just a worse Night Harvester. We're gonna rank both of these at the same time. Luden's Tempest is gonna be D tier for me. It's not even C tier. The item isn't fun, and it's not good either. So I have nothing positive really to say for the item. Night Harvester is an A tier for me for sure. When I play AP Udyr, full AP Udyr, it's almost always Night Harvester I play, because I long for these days where Phoenix used to be a one-shot machine, and that is a little bit of nostalgia item. I can't put it S tier, because meta-wise, there is better AP items. It's not insanely good, but it's a solid A tier for sure. It's a solid A tier. Alright. Now we got Liandry's. Liandry's also being a guest star here, because we have built a 101 Udyr builds episode with Liandry's. Mask Master Udyr to be exact, where we built Demonic Embrace into Liandry's. We have 2 burn items, and we top that off with Abyssal Mask, which recently has gotten a buff that reduces the magic resistance of the enemy, which then buffs your Phoenix damage and the damage of your mask. Just a beautiful synergy of all the 3 masks together. That alone puts the item really high up for me. I have history with this item, I have built it on a 101 Udyr builds, and it has nice synergies with other items. Now, as a meta item, it's not that huge. As I said, Udyr doesn't need mana when he's playing in the jungle, and I'm most comfortable building this item in the jungle. You can rush Demonic Embrace first and then go Liandry's afterwards, so you don't waste too much gold on the mana, because gold is more valuable in the early game than the late game. But it's still, the fact remains that you spend gold on a stat that you don't need. It is worth it for the burn effect for sure, and as I mentioned with the Rocketbelt, in the late game on Phoenix Udyr, you're looking for these moments where you can sneak close to the enemy, drop your fat awakened R, have the enemy burn and disengage from it. Now, building Liandrys on Udyr combined with Demonic and having that triple burn damage, if you land a good awakened Phoenix on the enemy, it's so rewarding. Now I'm gonna do a little bit of a controversial here and put this item in S tier. Meta speaking, like how strong the item is, I don't think Liandrys can keep up with Night Harvester or Rocketbelt. I think Night Harvester and Rocketbelt are both better full AP items than Liandrys. But just the fun angle of having the triple burn effect and the history I have with the item puts it in an S tier for me. Alright, next we got Moonstone Renewer. Moonstone Renewer is just a sad story. It's just a super sad story. With Moonstone Renewer we also had a 101 Udyr builds episode with Masochist Udyr. It had a super fun interaction where when you build Bramble Vest and the enemy attacked you, the Bramble Vest damage that the enemy received triggered Moonstone Renewer, which then healed your allies. So you taking damage damages the enemy, then heals your allies. It was beautiful. So that's why we called it Masochist Udyr, because he enjoys the pain because it's healing his allies, damaging the enemy. It was a super fun interaction, really cool, and the item had a nice passive effect of a ramping up heal and shield boost. After a few seconds in battle, the item would give you a 25% heal and shield boost, just like Spirit Visage does. Combining that with Spirit Visage was completely crazy. With the 50% heal and shield boost on a champion like Udyr, where, you know, you can spam Turtle and outsustain the enemy like crazy. The item was amazing. If we would be talking about old Moonstone, I would have put this in S tier. And I'm really sorry to you if you didn't get to enjoy Moonstone Udyr before it was removed. Because now, what we have now is damn near unplayable for the Udyr. The new effect of Moonstone Renewer, TLDR, it does that if you heal an ally, the healing effect is buffed if the ally is alone, and if there's another ally nearby, which can't be yourself, he also receives a heal. So you can just, yeah, okay, a single target heal becomes a massive heal. Great. The thing is, Udyr only has self-heals in his kit. The only heal you could get from your runes is Font of Life, and that isn't really worth it with the Moonstone Renewer effect. To actually activate this effect, you would need to build healing items like Redemption and Mikael's Blessing. If you're really committed, I guess you could play a full healing Udyr build, but there's no way Moonstone Renewer could ever step up to the old Moonstone Renewer. But thinking about Moonstone now just makes me sad. The item used to be so great and now it's shit. Especially with Echoes of Helia now being in the game, it just feels like a Moonstone replacement. The effect is damn near untriggerable, the stats are shit. D tier. This hurts me. This really hurts me. This item would have been an S tier for me. Maybe high A tier, but probably S tier. And now it's D tier, so I don't think any other mythic item has fallen that much in the past few patches. Alright, next up we got Navori Quickblades. Navori Quickblades is really similar to Infinity Edge, but there's a few key differences. It has a little bit less AD, but instead it has 15 ability haste, which is really good, right? It gives some utility. With Infinity Edge you have trouble catching up onto the enemy and sustaining against him because you have no ability haste. Navori Quickblade allows you to spam your attacks a bit more often, so you got more movement speed with your E, so more mobility, and you got more sustain with your W. It's a little bit better than Infinity Edge. Also, the effect is pretty interesting. It's providing bonus ability damage based on your crit chance. So if you have Navori Quickblades and you use your Awakened Q or Awakened R onto the enemy, the damage of the ability is actually getting buffed. It's kind of a funky interaction. Now I don't know if this would actually outdamage the bonus crit damage Infinity Edge gives, but from the ability haste it provides alone, I would have to put it higher than Infinity Edge. It's not fair for Navori Quickblades to be in the same tier as Infinity Edge, but I would definitely not suggest building the item. So yeah, this is a C tier. Okay, next up we got Radiant Virtue. Again, I have done a build with this item long ago before the item got a huge buff, which now it makes it even better. I got history of this item, I really like it. As you can see, I love support items on the deer. Healing on Udyr, supporting on Udyr is fun to me. But there's more to this item than just supporting. It's really expensive, and it is definitely a tier above casual support items. It gives a lot of health, a lot of armor, and the active effect is not only interesting for your team because of the heals, but also interesting to you. Because when you activate this item, it gives you health, right? It's really similar to a Nessus or Renekton ult, where they just pop up, get bigger, and get a bunch of health. It's super nice for turnaround. And this is especially interesting when you play it on Udyr. Most champions trigger this item, Radiant Virtue, with their ultimate ability. Udyr doesn't have an ultimate ability, so he triggers this item with his Awakened cast, which is a blessing and a curse at the same time. Why is it a blessing? Well, he gets to trigger it pretty much on cooldown. Every time the item is up, he will very likely have his Awakened up. So he can trigger the item, get his bonus health, and get some healing. Get a good trait in, right? It's also interesting because if you would trigger the Awakened Boar, which then activates Radiant Virtue, you would get the overtime healing from Radiant Virtue, the health boost from Radiant Virtue, the shield from the turtle, and the healing from the turtle. Good luck trying to take that down. The turnaround potential from Radiant Virtue Turtle Deer is crazy. Love this item. Actually played it last stream combined with Redemption and just healed my entire team to full backup and teamfight. Super fun. The only bad thing I have to say about this item is you can't play it in the jungle, in my opinion. You can play it on top lane and mid lane, and the sustain it gives is nice. But here's the curse on why it's bad that it triggers on your Awakened. If you clear the jungle with Udyr, you're gonna use your Awakened to clear the jungle. Especially if you build Radiant Virtue, which gives no damage, you have to use your Awakened to get a good jungle clear in. However, if you use your Awakened against the monsters in the jungle, that will trigger the item, give you the healing boost and the healing when you don't need it. When you're fighting the monsters, you won't need the Radiant Virtue active. And then the item is put on a 90-second cooldown and you're not gonna have it for the next skirmish or the next gank. So in the jungle, Radiant Virtue is unplayable, but on top lane and mid lane Udyr, it's really fun. If you ever needed a sign to start playing Udyr on a lane outside of the jungle, Radiant Virtue is that sign, yes. To me, that item is S tier. Next up, we got Rageblade. A very interesting option on Udyr with the changes it has gotten recently. The old Rageblade was really shit, and now it has gotten buffed, and you can actually ramp the effect up onto minions and get your double hits in, and it's really interesting. And it would have been goated on the old Udyr, because the old Udyr had an on-hit effect on his stance, and after 3 auto attacks staying in the same stance, he would get that on-hit effect again. And as long as you stayed in the same stance, you could trigger the effect again and again and again. Stances had values without switching. The new Udyr doesn't have that. If you switch into your Q stance with the new Udyr, you get 2 on-hit effects. And then they're gone. Until you switch into another stance or the Q again, it won't have a bonus on-hit effect. And that goes for all the stances. All of Udyr's new stances only got an on-hit bonus effect for 2 auto attacks and then it's gone. Now Rageblade makes that all your on-hit effects trigger double. But if you hit the enemy and trigger Rageblade, it's just gonna use both of your on-hit effects at the same time, making you run out of your stance's on-hit effects faster, and then after that it won't trigger any more on-hit effects. You have to switch again to provide more on-hit effects for the Rageblade. Building Rageblade actually makes it a race, right? Because you have to provide more and more on-hit effects by keep switching the stance, so there's on-hit effects for Rageblade to trigger. Otherwise, Rageblade will just do a double auto attack without any on-hit effects on it. The only way to make Rageblade worth it on Udyr is to actually build other on-hit items that Rageblade can trigger double. Because the on-hit effects Udyr has in his kit are shit for Rageblade. They're shit. There's definitely good things about to say this item. It has a nice synergy with Lethal Tempo, and Udyr likes to build Lethal Tempo on top lane and sometimes even in the jungle. The bonus attack speed Udyr gets from his Q and his passive help you trigger and stack Rageblade much faster. The only thing Udyr can't provide is on-hit effects for Rageblade, and if you look at any other champion building Rageblade, they have one thing in common: they have an on-hit effect in their kit that the Rageblade can trigger more often. Udyr doesn't have that. You have to build another on-hit item to make this item useful, and by then you are really squishy, so it's really aggressive. You can get experimental with this item, it's definitely fun. I wouldn't suggest building this item. It doesn't have a place in the meta right now. The win rate on this item is terrible. But it's definitely no Goredrinker or Navori Quickblades. For me, this is an easy B tier. Alright, next up we got Riftmaker. Again, an item with a very special place in my heart. About, I think, 8 patches ago, Demonic Embrace and Jak'Sho Udyr was at its absolute height. People were spamming that shit, perma winning games, and I played it a little bit and I was like, this is good, this is strong, but it's boring, right? I decided to play Udyr with Demonic Embrace and Riftmaker, sometimes even rushing Riftmaker first and then going into Demonic Embrace. It was just a more aggressive option of Jak'Sho. It's really similar, because they both give health, but Jak'Sho provides armor and magic resistance, where Riftmaker provides ability power and Omnivamp, right? And this Omnivamp and ability power ramps up during the fight. So it's similar to Jak'Sho because they both ramp up during the fight, right? Udyr enjoys these long fights with these items. Similar to Liandry's, it was just really rewarding when you hit that Awakened R while having 2 ability power items instead of just 1. I actually reached Diamond with Riftmaker Udyr playing the last season. And it was the first time I reached Diamond. So good memories with this item, and nothing has changed ever since I've done this. I would still do it. Riftmaker, in my opinion, is probably the most goated AP item on Udyr. I think, yeah, quote me on that. From all the mythic items, I think Riftmaker is definitely the most goated. That's an S tier. Alright, next up we got Rod of Ages. It has a lot of mana, so it's a bit rough to build it on jungle Udyr. All the more it's good on top lane or mid lane Udyr, where he's really mana hungry. I think it's definitely interesting to build Rod of Ages on Udyr, because Udyr is usually a champion that performs hard in the early game and then snowballs into the mid game. That has been the case with old Udyr and with new Udyr. Riot has changed Udyr a bit so he scales better into the late game and he doesn't fall off hard, right? He's still useful in the late game and he scales, but the fact remains that he's better in the early to mid game and he is looking to dominate early and then snowball. With Rod of Ages, you kind of change this up. Rod of Ages, combined with Sarah's Embrace and some rune sets, really allow you to scale stupidly hard into the late game. My newest 101 Udyr builds actually was with Rod of Ages, and it was interesting to play Udyr on a scaling angle. I played this build on stream as well, and pretty much every time I kind of fucked up my lane, I griefed, I fell behind, and every time the scaling power and the effect of this item just brought me back into the game. And speaking of the effect of the item, also super interesting, when it's fully stacked, it just provides a full level. It's such a unique mechanic. No other item in the game provides you with experience. Right? Experience is a stat you can't buy, but this item just gives you a full level. It's definitely not on the same level as Liandry's or Riftmaker, because it's not super fun. The angle it provides is interesting though. So I'm gonna give it an 8 here. Alright, next up we got Shurelya's. Shurelya's, again, we got history. The very first Udyr guide I ever did on my channel actually had Shurelya's at its core item, where I played the support Udyr in the jungle. I've built Shurelya's and the item has only gotten better since then. It provides all the stats Udyr needs, ability haste, ability power and health, while also providing a nice active effect that gives movement speed, and movement speed is always fun and good on Udyr. But here's a problem you probably often encountered when playing Udyr. You chase the enemy across half the fucking map, then you finally catch them, but your team can't follow up, right? They're not as fast as you. You finally got the enemy, but your team can't follow up. With Shurelya's, that shit don't happen. Because when you use its active effect, not only you get bonus movement speed, but your team as well. If you gank a lane or looking for a skirmish with your team near the dragon and you see an enemy out of position, you pop that Shurelya's, you run at the enemy, and your team, they follow up. It's crazy that neuron activation, Shurelya's, actually motivates your team to engage. They hear the sound effect, they get the movement speed, and they're like, okay, where are we going, right? They react to Shurelya's every time. So the item is crazy fun, it gives good stats, there's only one tiny detail that really hurts. It's this item has a passive effect that gives you and your ally bonus movement speed every time you heal them. Obviously, Udyr can only heal himself unless he goes the rune Font of Life. For some weird reason though, Font of Life doesn't trigger Shurelya's. I think it's a bug. Echoes of Helia can be triggered with Font of Life, but for some reason Shurelya's can't. So you actually can't use the passive effect of Shurelya's unless you build a healing item in your item build. But even then, even still, you don't need the passive effect. Even then, it's still such a good and fun item. And as I said, the first Udyr guide I ever did, it's gotta be S tier. Alright, next up we got Stridebreaker. Stridebreaker is definitely better than Goredrinker. I think you kind of need to compare the two, because they got such a similar build path, and the active effect is both like a whiplash around you. But the difference between Goredrinker and Stridebreaker is, where Goredrinker provides sustain through healing and Omnivamp, Stridebreaker puts everything in movement speed. You get a movement speed effect for dealing physical damage, it gives passive movement speed, and you can use the active effect of Stridebreaker while running. You don't have to stop to use it, which is something I really appreciate for smooth gameplay. Like, every time I can think of fun synergies, that makes the item just so much greater for me. If I have to rate the item on its own, as a standalone without a build, it's tough to imagine myself playing the item in a game and then the rating ends up a bit lower than it probably deserves. With Stridebreaker I can come up with something right off the bat. It's definitely an interesting item and much better than Goredrinker. Is it better than Everfrost, Heartsteel, Locket and Rageblade? I'd say so, yes, I'd say so. I think it would be criminal to put Stridebreaker below the items in A tier, because some of the items in A tier are worse than Stridebreaker. I'd much rather play a Stridebreaker Udyr than a Ghostblade Udyr, or Rod of Ages Udyr, or Galeforce Udyr. I think Stridebreaker deserves that respect for sure. Alright, and last but not least, we got the OG Sheen item. This used to be the go-to item on old Udyr if you had no idea what you were doing, right? If you were new to Udyr, it was always press the attack into Trinity Force. That was a solid build that always worked. And matter of fact, when the new Udyr came out and I didn't know what to do, I was like, okay, fuck it. I would just go Trinity Force into press the attack. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. A solid item, it's always there for you. If you're struggling, you go Trinity Force. Now, when Divine Sunderer was introduced into the game, Trinity Force was kinda knocked off of its pedestal. Now there was a different Sheen item in town, right? And they constantly had to compete with each other. With the latest patch, this has gotten a lot more interesting. Usually I always went Divine Sunderer because the healing effect giving you more sustain just seems so much nicer, so much safer, right? And the magic pen effect is nice and the physical pen effect is nice. But Trinity Force now got a buff where the stats of it has just been purely increased, and that is definitely what it needed. Because Trinity Force is the aggressive Sheen option compared to Divine Sunderer. A lot of people think Divine Sunderer is like a tanky Trinity Force, but that's not that true. Because Trinity Force has just as much health as Divine Sunderer. The only thing it doesn't have is that heal effect. On the other hand, you will slap harder and more often with the attack speed of Trinity Force. And definitely the hardest selling point of that item, it can stack on minions and turrets. Divine Sunderer you can only use on champions, the healing effect that is. But the damage effect and the ramp up effect of Trinity Force actually works on minions and towers, which definitely makes it the superior split push item. Now, would I put Trinity Force in S tier? I can't, guys. I can't. It probably deserves S tier, but I've been spamming Divine Sunderer ever since it came out and hardly ever touching Trinity Force. Now that Trinity Force has been buffed, I've been playing it like 1 or 2 games. It looks fun, but honestly, I haven't played it enough to be able to say, hey, is it on the same level now? I think it is, but it's definitely a high A tier. It's a super high A tier. It might even be S tier. It's probably S tier, but I don't play the item enough to speak for it. There you have it. This is the ultimate and only tier list you will ever need on all the mythic items on Udyr. Now obviously, as I said at the start, there's multiple factors going into this tier list. It's not just how good it is in the meta, but also how much fun I have with that item, my personal preference, right? And how I think other people are gonna have fun with the item. The fun angle is always important. You might have a different opinion and feel free to share that in the comments, right? We can discuss what you think deserves to be S tier, or you can be mad about me putting some of the items you like in the D tier, right? Looking at you, Iceborn Gauntlet builders. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me. Thank you for checking this out. If you have another idea for a tier list I could do, let me know. And if you don't want to miss that video, hit that subscribe button, right? Hit the like button, helps me out a lot. See you all in the next one. Bye bye.